Hi guys, Claudia Boleyn here, and I know it's been a really long time since I made a sort of talking video like this. I think the last time I was making them like this, it was during the first lockdown. I was working really hard on my degree. I've got my results back and I've got a first, so I'm really happy about that, and I'm now doing my MA. So the reason I've been posting less is that obviously the MA has a much bigger workload, and I'm a real perfectionist and I want to try and get the best grades I can, so I'm working really hard. I'm also still doing my Umbrella Academy videos. I'm working on the Diego character study at the moment. It's just taking longer because, again, I don't really have so much free time. But I wanted to get back to you and do some more talking videos because a lot of people have said that they prefer them. And I also like talking to you guys on this stuff, and it helps me process my own thoughts. So this video itself is not scripted at all. Rarely a video of mine is scripted unless it's like a video essay. So it's just me sitting here and talking. It's going to go all over the place. So it's going to start with a topic that I've wanted to talk about for a while, and it's going to kind of expand from there. And I was thinking about how to talk about this, and I thought I'd begin from within a sphere that I talk about, which is fandom. And then I wanted to take it out further into society and branch it out, because my brain kind of works like that. It kind of sprawls out. And I thought that if we got like a sort of microcosm of the idea I'm talking about, and then we grew it out, it might be easier to talk about. And it's easier for me to talk about it and get it out of my brain in a more articulate way. So as you will see by the title, it's not a clickbait title. I'm talking about the Moffat Hates versus the Not My Doctor situation in a specific fandom, which is the Doctor Who fandom. You don't have to be part of that to understand this, don't worry, I'll explain it. I'm also going to go on to talking about centrism, the idea of fascism and Antifa. I might touch on the situation with Israel and Palestine even. I've got a lot of thoughts about all this kind of stuff, and in my brain it ties together, because I think that's something I think about a lot, and I might be wrong, and maybe it's maybe I'm doing a Jess Phillips and making it really like self-centered, but I tend to think to understand the broader topics and the broader ideas in human nature and why these things happen, you can see these microcosms in your families, in your communities, your immediate communities, and that's how we can understand how these things happen in life. So as I'm making this, Donald Trump, it seems to be maybe just about to lose out on the election. I stayed up last night, watched a pretty horrific speech he made where he's clearly not going to concede, and I've never seen anything like this in all my life. I'm not getting into that. There are Americans who can do this much better than me. But I was thinking about how it got to that situation, and how Donald Trump has used something. He has used this idea of both sidesism, and him using that has allowed him to control a narrative and gain power. And we're at a point where a lot of people think he's an idiot. People say, oh, he's stupid, he's mad. I think he's intelligent. I think he's very smart, because this is a good manipulation technique, and we see this in all sorts of societies, all sorts of problems, where if you both sides an issue, you can present yourself as the rational middle, the upholder of law and the status quo. And that way you can keep things as they are, but perhaps even take them slightly further to the right. That's what I've seen anyway. But let's begin with the Moffat Hate and Not My Doctor stuff, because this is probably the first experience I had in my life where I kind of witnessed this point of view. So, as you know, I was on Tumblr in about 2014, 2013, and I didn't have a very big blog, and I'm a massive Doctor Who fan. I was on the Doctor Who Time team. The Russell T Davies era of the show especially is just my favourite. I think it's fantastic. I could talk forever about it, and so many of my morals in life actually came from that show. I was talking to Dan, who's my brother, the other day about this, and we've gone through some stuff in life, which, I won't talk about here. But a lot of our morals and our hope, and hopefully what's made us good people, I hope we're good people, we try to be, is a lot of the lessons that we learned from the media we watched. So watching the Rusty Davies era of Doctor Who, Rose Tyler's speech about being the one that stands up when everyone just runs away resonated with me. There's a speech from BBC Merlin where Morgana, my favourite character, totally done dirty by the narrative, by the way, says sometimes you have to do what's right and damn the consequences. We're both those sorts of personalities where we don't really submit to authority if authority is unjust. And we've always been taught in our family, well, I don't know if we've been taught, we've seen it, and by necessity we've become the sorts of people that will say a thing, even if maybe it's an uncomfortable thing to say and it gets you a bit of stick. So we do that. I don't want to say we're comfortable with it. I don't know how Dan feels. I'm not comfortable with it, but I just am that way. It's just the way I'm wired. I can't really change it. And again, it's got me into a lot of trouble. So, I'm going off topic again, but the Moffat Hate situation. So, back on 2013, 2014, I was a big Doctor Who fan, loved it during the Rusty Davies era. And I noticed it started to get pretty sexist. So I was becoming a feminist at that time. I was noticing a lot of stuff around me. I was really becoming quite active in being able to identify these tropes. Because obviously all my life I had, as most women, all your life you kind of get the sexism. But maybe as you get older, for me, I started to look more at where it was coming from, why people thought like this. Because I don't think sexists are necessarily bad people. I think some of these ideas are just ingrained in society, so it is more of an action to have to deny it. It's like with racism, like white supremacy is inbuilt in the societies that we live in, and we have to take an action to be actively anti-racist. If you don't do anything, you kind of remain in the racist state, which is hard to talk about again because people will say, oh, you're calling everyone racist, and I don't think it means you're a bad person, is what I'm saying. I think so much of this stuff is ingrained in society, and I was reading about and thinking about why. How do these ideas get in? And I was thinking about how I had been formed by the media I watched. And I started to realise, and I still believe this to this day, that the media we watch really influences the way we grow up. Especially something like Doctor Who. There's something about the magic of Doctor Who, and maybe this is just me as a fan, but there's something incredible about it. This alien from the future, or from a long, long way away, who has so many lives, who's seen so much, and just represents goodness. And they can be flawed, but they're ultimately on the right side. And I love how the Doctor will try and stop wars, and the Doctor will show compassion, and he'll often teach, or she will often teach, his or her companions to be compassionate. And I love that about Doctor Who. So obviously I was getting slightly disturbed by some of the sexism we were seeing in the Stephen Moffat era. And at first, Series 5 was, in my opinion, I really liked Series 5. There are good aspects to Moffat's writing, but some of the sexism was disturbing. So, for example, the immediate sexualisation of Amy was a bit disturbing. The pan up her legs, the kissogram, the whole overarching idea that she was a bad girl, messed up by her issues, by the guy that abandoned her. So she became over-sexual, and now she has to be tamed by a good man. But will she make the right choice? She's so wild and sexy and feisty, and that became a bit of a Moffat blueprint, I think. There was a lot of sexism, as I say. It's not just it's a number of things. It's the way it was filmed. It's some of the dialogue, the overarching message, the way the Doctor himself acted, and the tropes. So, for example, we had the mystical pregnancy trope where Amy's body was used as a plot device. She gave birth, and I'm not saying you can't do that either. It's so clear. It became so clear in his writing that he was writing for the little boys, which, by the way, was doing them a disservice, I think. And he was writing like, oh, the action stuff's more important. The female companion has literally just given birth and lost a child, but that doesn't matter. It's fine. It's sexy. It's funny. It's feisty. And it just started to get really bad. So, I was seeing a lot of tropes and a lot of patterns, and I was calling a lot of that out. And it got to a point where I was talking about it quite a lot, and it really did make me angry. So we got to a point where the Doctor actually slapped his companion's bum, which is like a carry-on film. And a lot of people think maybe I'm making too much of a big deal of it, or maybe I did. And maybe I did, but the way I think about this stuff is that the media you watch as a kid influences your worldview. All I can say is that my worldview was influenced by the media I watched as a kid. And I think especially for children, in situations where maybe they don't have that solid foundation, that solid background, they don't have people teaching them those things. They might be in a bad situation. It's something that can offer hope. It can reach them. And it can change a whole generation. I do believe that media and fiction, you can't really sway me on this. I do honestly believe that representation, media, fiction, the way we deal with certain subjects plays a huge part in normalising different aspects of society, the way we think about things, the people that we accept, the issues we think about. It can make us have more compassion. Equally, it can make us go the other way if things are positioned badly. So a lot of videos on my channel and what you'll see of me on Twitter is often, I get really frustrated when I see, for example, the soaps or shows taking an issue or a marginalised group and representing them in a way that is damaging to that community. Because I truly believe it does damage that community and the overall ideas in society people have about these communities. And that takes us right up to the top. It can get to the ideas of legislation. I mean, look at the trans community right now. I mean, it's quite frightening. Some of the things coming out of the BBC, I'm sorry I'm going off topic, but I have to bring this up. You know, there was that idea that they didn't want people, they were told, the employees, they didn't want them to go to Pride because they didn't want them to be seen as taking a side on the transgender debate. And that's frightening because the transgender debate, it's just not a debate, it's people's lives. It's real trans people just trying to get on in life. And they have the right, you would think, to be safe and to be who they are and to be respected. And the way that, for example, we see trans people on TV, trans characters on TV is extremely important. And I think a lot of the time it's the same with the acceptance of gay, lesbian and bisexual people. And I talk so much about how badly bisexuals are represented, especially by Emmerdale at the moment. We've had a bad situation there recently. A repeat of 2017. Yeah, it's bad. I might make a video about that. And I have to say that I do get really harsh with this stuff, but it is out of love. And it's out of this desperate desire that, this feeling that if these shows utilise what they can do, if they give a good message, if they educate, they really do have the power to change the world, and they have the power to change the lives of the marginalised and the oppressed. And I sometimes I don't think they take that very seriously. It's not just, you know, this fictional escapism always. Sometimes the smallest things, the smallest acceptance, the issues that are brought up, can make people open their minds to issues and think more about them, and it can start conversations. And I think that so strongly. That's kind of my big worldview when it comes to media. For example, with the transphobia that goes on at the moment, it's really important, if we can, that media gives us these trans stories and these trans characters, because I think we're at a point where people who are against trans people are trying to frame it as, and we're getting to the bigger topic of this video here a little bit early, they're trying to frame it as the evil trans activists versus, okay, the people who take it too far and are transphobic. And then there's the people in the middle who aren't transphobic, but they just want a little debate about this issue. You know, they want to debate the lives of the trans people and their situation, and they want to treat it like that's the valid, professional, wise opinion to sit there in the middle and let trans people be harmed and killed and disrespected and made to feel unsafe. Anyway, because so much stuff is so transphobic at the moment, there's so much of that stuff out there, anything the media can do, like anything fiction can do, TV shows can do, to make people realise that trans people are just normal people. I mean, so many of these people don't have trans friends or friends in the LGBT community, and it's the same with people who are gay or who are lesbian or who are bi. You know, I truly think that having more gay couples or bi couples or lesbian couples on television has led people to accept it. The soaps are a huge part of that, you know? It just becomes normal for people. We still have huge strides to take, obviously, but I think it does play a huge part. It makes things less of a taboo. And also, if you're someone watching at home and, for example, you know, you're bisexual at home and you're watching a soap deal with a bisexual character and a biphobic issue, it's going to matter to you and the people around you how they frame that, you know? And anyway, I'm getting back onto the Emmerdale issue. That's another video, my friends. Back to Moffat and the Moffat hate. So, I and a few other people, mostly young feminists, people from minority groups, marginalised groups, would write critiques and talk about this and discuss it. But people in the fandom didn't like it. So if we left this stuff, if we put this stuff online, we would get harassed. So there was an awful lot of harassment for this. And I should also say, there were never personal attacks involved in this. You know, it was a pure critique of the writing. I mean, if you regard saying somebody is sexist as a personal attack, then I suppose you could say it was a personal attack. But it was never like, oh, I want harm to come to this person and that kind of thing. It was more a plea for equality and to fix the issue, and this is the problem, pointing it out. And a lot of people, because fandoms are often dominated by, the Doctor Who fandom was quite dominated by white men in fandom, and they felt quite uncomfortable. Some of them were great, but some of them felt quite uncomfortable, especially because a lot of the critiques were coming from women, LGBT people, people of colour. And so we were asked, we were told we were ruining the whole experience for everyone, even when we put this on our own blogs, making these critiques. We were taking it too seriously. We're getting this barrage of hatred and abuse, personal hatred and abuse, not just critiques of our critiques, which is absolutely fine and I welcome now, and I still, you know, that's a good thing to do. If you're able to write a critique and discuss something, like, I'm always very pro that. So we were asked, foolish as we were, young, foolish, naive and idealistic as we were, So we were asked to tag this stuff as Moffat Hate, so people could tag it and they wouldn't have to see it. And because, I mean, for me, I feel like people's comfort online is important in terms of what they're able to tag and avoid. I just thought, you know what, that's fair. I thought, you know, if you don't want to have to see this stuff popping up, that's fine. I'll tag it, it's no issue. So we started tagging it with that. We should have foreseen, and this is something that I'll get into later. In fact, I think I'm going to get into it with regard to Jeremy Corbyn, which is quite interesting. At least I think it's quite interesting. But the moment we did that, we fell into a trap because we were then regarded as toxic haters, like a hate group, when we had written the tag as a courtesy so people could block it. Because things on Tumblr, you know, if you would put like hate after it, if it was like a negative thing, so people could just block it just because it's easier in the system. You know, if you wouldn't tag it with a light criticism of Stephen Moffat, not as a man but as a writer, because people couldn't tag that and people couldn't blacklist that and avoid it. And the whole purpose is that people can avoid it if they want to make their experience easier for them. So it became, oh, you're a load of haters, you're a toxic group of fans, and again, it just ended up in more harassment. And again, this was a group of women, of neurodiverse people, of people of colour. And it was a very, I thought it was a very respectful community. If ever anyone said anything personally awful about Stephen Moffat himself, I was one of the first people to say, no, that's not acceptable. And then we'd have the people with their jokes like, oh, Moffat, him and his clever plot twists, I want to kill him, I wish he was dead. That didn't come from us. That was from, you know, people making jokes about people who really loved him. And then I remember in an interview, I think Moffat was like, oh, I think some people on Tumblr want me dead. And clearly he was referring to that. But then again, they used it, the people who wanted us to be quiet, and were like, it's you people are doing this to this poor man. And the power imbalance was so wrong. If you think about it as well, you know, this defence and harassment in the name of sexist writing against a group, calling it out in a polite and respectful way. And I've always prided myself on doing it like that. Just because, even when I haven't really felt like it, just because it's easier to have the discussion that way. And the ultimate aim is that change happens and people think about it. So, you know, it doesn't really help to be like really combative. You know, I've found it doesn't help in that situation. I'm not saying anger is bad. On Twitter, sometimes it's, you know, you can be more angry on Twitter. You can, you know, get more reactive to stuff because it's shorter. But in that situation, when the idea is to discuss and debate and write essays and stuff like that, you know, there's no point in being combative, so people weren't. So now we have a situation where Jodie Whittaker is now the Doctor. And there is a group that's emerged called the Not My Doctors, the NMDs. And as soon as she was cast, they were sexist. They were just so misogynistic, so vile, so personally hostile, for the pure fact that a woman had been cast in the role of the Doctor. And the hatred for her has been based on not her portrayal or the characterisation of her character, of which I think is valid. I think people have a right to critique different Doctors and say, I like this one, I don't like this one, you know, that's fair. There's elements I don't like about the 13th Doctor as well. But, you know, a lot of this was really sexist and vile, and it was just pure harassment. And you see these videos all over YouTube, and they're often getting, like, suggested to me because I watch Doctor Who videos. And it's just usually a sexist guy just talking about how much he hates Jodie Whittaker. And then when you try and find out why, it's like, has she done something? Has she said something? Which would be valid reason to dislike her. No, it's just because she's a woman who's cast as the Doctor. You know, it's awful. So we've got this toxic element of fandom who are just sexist, racist often, homophobic, non-progressive, and they are essentially like a little hate pocket in the fandom. Now here is where it gets interesting, because now we have got the people who have taken on the wise central ground. And this is where I truly think society goes wrong time and time again, and will keep going wrong, and is why we are at the point we're in right now. And again, this is a microcosm, so I'm going to branch this out into society a bit more in a minute. I'm aware this is quite long, but just bear with me, I just want to chat. So you have people who truly believe that the central position between 2 points that they regard as extremes is automatically the valid position, the wise and noble position. It's the kind and good position. And anyone on either side of that are radicals and should be looked down upon equally. And in some situations that's valid. But oftentimes this happens with a marginalised group sticking up for themselves on one side and bigots on the other. So when people take the central view there and stand in that middle point and look down at everyone else from that point, especially if they're in a place of privilege themselves, where they can still enjoy something and be included in something because of who they are and their identity, they're able to discount the valid anger of the oppressed and the marginalised as something that's too far and too extreme just because it's outside of their worldview. So the situation we've got here, this is a tweet I saw recently, which is really interesting to me. From someone who has a great account, and I will check with them to see if they're okay with me putting their name in this video. If not, I'll blur it out, so I won't say it. One thing that bugs me is people acting like people who disliked Moffat were the equivalent to the Not My Doctors. One was mostly female fans complaining about sexist writing, and the other is men screeching at women existing. And I think this really hits the nail on the head. And this is a situation we see more in society. So as you know, I had an issue with this in the fandom. We had a situation where we've got the Not My Doctor group who hate the fact that Doctor Who's tried to be more progressive. And personally, I don't think Doctor Who right now is as progressive as it seems to be, or it's being claimed to be. Personally, I have my own issues with the series, and in some ways with the writing, like those critiques. And because of that as well, even if I did really like it, you know, I just want to say, like, I don't think there's any issue with anyone saying, I don't like this because, or I don't think the writing's good, or, you know, that's fine. People are okay to have their opinions. Again, we've got this weird sort of almost panicky defensive middle ground that everyone must agree all the time in the fandom about everything, otherwise you're bad and toxic, and it is almost a state of panic. And it's quite bizarre to watch. It's like these people are desperate and panicking, and I think maybe that's come about because there's so much toxicity from the Not My Doctor people that they're just in a panic and, we all have to be happy and hold hands all the time and no slight debate is okay because it's got to be good and it's fine, it's all good, it's all positive, and it's like a stress reaction, which is understandable but unhelpful. So yeah, in that situation, I remember I was on Time Team, and I don't know if I made a video about the whole situation. There were complaints about me being in the Time Team because I was like too radical as a feminist, and she's a social justice warrior, oh no, and she's a hateful person, she's evil because she hates Stephen Moffat, and she's bullying this poor defenceless man. And I remember being quite disappointed when the response from the magazine, or Ben, who was in charge of the magazine, was to take the middle point and be like, well, it's bad and these people don't like it, therefore, you know, you were the bad one in this situation. And it's like the context is kind of stripped out, and it's a situation we see in society where people who are marginalised standing up for themselves, they then become somehow an equal villain to the people that they have to stand up to themselves against. And that really did frustrate me, especially because I think that the idea of Time Team was to be more diverse and progressive. But for me, it wasn't that experience. I tended to think that we were maybe being asked to look progressive and to be that diversity, but we weren't really allowed to stray too far from the script, if you know what I mean. So in the end, I felt quite used by that. I'm still grateful for the experience, but the way that was done, I think in a couple of years' time, when we're in the future, we'll start to look back at the way things like this are run, these first steps into being more progressive that publications make and media makes. I think they really aren't as inclusive as they should be. At the moment, it's more about visibility and having a certain demographic of people visible, rather than listening to those perspectives. So it's very much join us and be part of the group so long as you have the same opinion of us, and it's great if you're a woman or you're a person of colour or you're LGBT, you know, that looks great, but don't disagree from your perspective as those groups that we're supposedly wanting you here for. So yeah, that was the issue I had. So taking this further, so let's totally shift this over and let's talk about Donald Trump. So I hope that I'm making sense and this is following some sort of trajectory, I don't know. But what we have, a much bigger and more dangerous version of this, which is happening in America and right now in conversation, is the idea of fascists versus Antifa. So I don't even know if I'm saying that right. I've only read it. Is it Antifa or Antifa? I don't know. But we have the fascists versus the anti-fascists. So Donald Trump is positioning the issue cleverly as a situation where the fascists are bad However, the anti-fascists are just as bad, and they're a hate group. They're a terror group. Like, you know, they're evil. But there's a clear difference, and this is where I think the situations, and a lot of these situations, they have this in common. The hate that the anti-fascists have is a hate for fascism. So the hate for an ideology that discriminates against them and other people. The hate that the fascists have is a hatred for democracy and diversity and equality and safety for people. So one is a legitimate hate group and a danger, as we've seen throughout history. The other is popping up to oppose that hate group. However, the positioning of it by people in the middle, maybe slightly right, who are kind of okay with a bit of the fascism but don't want to be seen as like a super fascist, often people in the middle will be to act like they're all the same, but we're all good in the middle, therefore nothing needs to change. They're both reactionaries, they're both dangerous, and we don't pay any attention to either. Which again is dangerous because the people in the middle are often people who wouldn't be affected by the issue in the first place. So they wouldn't be people who are particularly affected by fascism. I mean, I say that. Everyone's affected by fascism. But they wouldn't see themselves as immediately vulnerable to that. We've seen it with the Black Lives Matter protests. So we have the police brutality. We've seen clashes. I've seen a lot of it online. I think because of social media now, you see it with a lot more immediacy, and it's really disturbing. We're seeing in America, or we do have similar issues here, but I mean, it's really blown up in America recently. Not in terms of it, there's been more of it, but in terms of the awareness seems to have come on. You know, it's less avoidable, it's less ignorable now. You've got situations where you're seeing the police attacking protesters, firing on them. And you see protesters, for example, I saw a protester throw tear gas back at the police officers. And people were acting like they were the bad elements because they were attacking the beloved, good police. When they were retaliating, they were throwing tear gas back. And that's not to mention that the police shouldn't have been firing on civilians anyway. They shouldn't have been firing on protesters. They shouldn't have been acting in that way. And they certainly shouldn't have been in a position of defending what some of their officers have done. You know, they were the villains to any right-minded people. You know, if you wrote this down, they were the villains of that situation. They acted wrongly. And yet you've got, the Black Lives Matter people. I believe in racial equality, people will say, but the Black Lives Matter people are taking it too far. You actually ask them, what do they mean by that? What do you mean they're taking it too far? They don't really have an answer. They just like to sit in the middle. They like to be the reasonable, rational one, right in the middle. And because people take this position, we are stuck in a situation where society has these major issues, these major flaws that affect the marginalised. The marginalised are at breaking point, they're trying to rise up, but we can't move because we're crushed in. We cannot move because we've got the centrists who are trying to keep things steady and stable in the sense that they want you to be quiet, essentially. And then obviously you've got the actual far-right people, you've got the dangerous hate groups, getting bolder and bolder, because by the middle acting like you're both the same, they are actually legitimising those groups. They are turning it into a situation where, we should have a debate about this, you know? And that's why we get a situation like here in the UK where people think it's all right that trans people have to go on TV and debate their rights and their right to be themselves. You know, these people in the centre genuinely think that these issues will be solved. For example, with fascists and anti-fascists. If the fascists and the anti-fascists just got together and sorted out their problems. The middle point is not always the good point. Sometimes there are truths and there are lies. Sometimes there is good and bad. I know the world is complicated. But when you have fascism versus anti-fascism, there is a clear good and bad. Okay, the fascism is bad, right? It's not that there's a middle point of goodness between the two situations, and we're so clever and wise for sitting here and looking down at everyone from it. And it's why I feel frustration at the moment, because we've got a situation here in the UK where the leader of the Labour Party is a man called Keir Starmer. I didn't vote for him, I voted for Rebecca Long-Bailey personally, and I'm a big Corbyn supporter, as you probably know. There's a similar situation in America where, at the moment, Biden is possibly about to become president, but he is obviously the Democratic candidate. So, I think it can be agreed, and I don't know, I don't want to be too much, this is my opinion and this is right, but I think it can be agreed that Keir Starmer and Joe Biden sit on the kind of centre. They sit on the safe centre. So the problem we have, I think, is that the right is getting further right in both of these countries. So you've got Trump's government and his ideas are fascist. They are quite far right in a lot of cases. We have the Tories in power, and they recently voted against children in poverty having free school meals. They essentially voted to starve children. I mean, that's the situation we're in. And these central candidates, when you have somebody, an opposition to so far right, you need a strong left candidate. I see the argument of centrists where they say that, oh, but people will be less disturbed by the centre and it will feel safer. But are you making social progress and change, and are you actually doing a good thing? Are you protecting the marginalised? Are you protecting the vulnerable? Because the right's getting further right. The right is getting so far right. The left are reacting in opposition and trying to say, we have to stop this, we have to do something. And then the centre positions itself between those 2 points. Now, because the right is so far right, that means their centre point is shifted to the right. So to me, these centrist candidates are quite dangerous because they're trying to hit the middle ground. But the middle ground is constantly shifting to the right because the right are getting bolder and bolder and bolder. They are going further to the right. And also I'm finding that in order not to spook people, they are turning on those on the left who are speaking truth, who are speaking truth to power, who are turning against the fascists, who are fighting back against this evil, is all I can call it, really. Here in the UK we have a situation where Jeremy Corbyn was called terrorist. He was absolutely piled on by the media. I'll get into that in another video, but really disproportionately the centre acted like he was a danger to our society. You know, he's not. He's a left-wing politician. For our country, he's quite left, but in terms of Europe, he's not even that far left. He's a bit like in the US, if you're from the US, he's a bit like Bernie Sanders. So, yeah, he's a left-wing, he's a socialist. But it's not that far left, really, if you look at other places. It's just that our centre is shifting further and further to the right. If we look at this in terms of oppression dynamics as well. So just for example, let's look at the situation between Israel and Palestine. And obviously this is like a difficult one to talk about because there's like such high feeling about it. But it's pretty clear that the Israeli government, which is quite right-wing, is mistreating the Palestinians. They are violating human rights. They are acting as an oppressive force. They are harming the people. I mean, think about what's going on in the Gaza Strip. I mean, it's not right. It's something that should be categorically regarded as wrong. And even more so when you think about the power imbalance between the might of the Israeli government and this ever-shrinking Palestine that is just getting stripped and stripped away and attacked constantly. So again, I'm not going to get into this in huge detail. There's people who can explain this much better than me. So you have a situation where the Israeli government is taking out settlements of the Palestinian people that have lived there all their lives, and is trying to claim it for themselves, which is obviously deeply wrong. The way the Israeli police is treating the people is inhumane. We see it all the time. It's deeply wrong. They are wrong in this situation. Like, they are acting in a way that is wrong. I mean, there's no two ways about it. But this is the problem. In order to try and not create conflict and to not make things worse, a lot of people, a lot of politicians are trying to take the centre ground. They're trying to say they're both as bad as each other, which isn't right. It's simply not true. And it can make you feel more diplomatic. It can make things feel easier to discuss it, but it's not the truth. And what is that doing? A, for the Palestinian people that are being harmed, and B, for the Israeli citizens who also are against the right regime that they've got going on right now. It's not helping. Resorting to that central point only results in more misery because it doesn't solve any of the problems. It just masks them, and a lot of the time it allows terrible things to happen. It allows human rights abuses. Again, back to Trump, he's referring to the radical left. The radical left don't exist. I mean, they're not in the way that he talks about. I'm sure there are some people that are really radical on the left. What he is referring to as the radical left are socialists. That's not radical. You know, he's referring to people who oppose fascism, who oppose him and his fascist beliefs. He is referring to them as radical now, and the media is eating it up. The media is reporting it. So again, the centre is shifting. The centre is such a dangerous, dangerous place to be. I am wary of people who choose to take that centre stance because they think it's the best thing to do for peace. Sometimes you just have to look at what's in front of you. You have to see what is right and what is wrong. And sometimes you have to take away the optics. Like, you have to really think about this on a human level. You have to look at the context of a situation. You have to be honest. It shouldn't be about how it comes across, it should be about the truth. And there are good people who eat this up. I don't think they're bad people. They think that that central point is right, and, oh, well, you know, both are as bad as each other, and we have to deal with both, but that's rarely the case. Sometimes it is, but often it's not. And there are good, well-meaning people who just simply don't apply what this means. If we take this central point in all of our discussions and all situations as being the best point, they don't think further about where that leads us as a society. We don't make progress in society by constantly staying in this central point and thinking that's right, and don't rock the boat, don't speak truth to power. You know, don't say anything that could be considered controversial. Don't speak your truth. Meanwhile, the right keep getting further and further right. They get more and more hateful. They're getting more violent, as we can see in America right now. And as you can kind of see here too. Okay, I think I'm going to wrap this up now. You might think it's weird that I started this from the fandom perspective, but I just thought it would be better to talk about it in terms of a microcosm. So something that you might have personally witnessed, or especially because people who watch this my channel are often quite into like media, sci-fi, and like, into Doctor Who, so it's something you might personally experience. And then I thought I would sprawl it out and kind of show how the same mentality happens on a bigger scale, and it keeps fanning out until it becomes really dangerous. So actually we have to kind of get it at the root immediately. It's too late to take that central point. We've got people now, just now, realising that Trump is a fascist. They're just realising it now. And when people called it out, like I did 4 years ago, and said we were worried about it, we were called snowflakes. We were called, reactionary leftists, like trying to spread panic and evil and sow division. But we weren't. And he is a fascist, and it's 4 years later. People are only finally starting to realise and get on board, but it might already be too late. You have to get the stuff at the root. I'm sorry, this is such a mess. It's been really good to talk to you again. I'll see you really soon. By the time this is up, we might know who the president is. I pray it's Biden. I don't even like Biden. I wouldn't have supported Biden as the Democratic candidate. You know, I have big issues with him. But I do not want the Republicans to get in. Trump has hit a new dangerous level. He is too dangerous to be in power, I believe, and I pray that the Democrats can get it. And that then leftists in that country can just work to create change that will really help people. I know things seem really bleak right now. It's quite a scary time to kind of be watching all this happen, especially when you're one of the people that saw it happening and were basically treated like Cassandra when she saw the fall of Troy happening in her vision and everyone thought she was hysterical. All I can do is just urge people to rethink this idea of the central view being correct, because if we keep doing that, the right are going to get further and further right, and we are going to be in a deeper, darker situation, and it will be because of the centre taking that stance. And I'm not blaming them as the aggressors. The real villains are clearly the fascists. But fascists don't get into power on their own. They get into power historically. If we look at how fascists rise, how fascism rises, they get there because of the centre not acting, because of the centre taking that central place between fascism and anti-fascism. That's how we get there. That's how we're getting there right now. Oh, I hope things get better. Okay, I love you loads. Please tell me your thoughts in the comments. I'll be really happy to hear them. And hopefully I'll see you soon. I might make more videos during lockdown, but it depends on the workload with my MA, because it's a lot of work. I don't know why I'm surprised by that, because of course it is, it's an MA. But yeah, I'll try and talk to you a bit more. Okay, I love you loads. Thank you so much for watching. Please keep yourself safe. Okay, love you. Bye.